All right. Thank you. And I was told to keep it under 2 hours. I should be able to do that okay. Just kidding. So yeah, I am a retired chaplain. So that's where my my background comes from, that my authority for this presentation. Just going back to, so that does work, going back to the history very quickly. Of course, one of the reasons I was excited to become part of the SAR was because my history in the chaplaincy as well, and my involvement, and I've been very involved in chaplain history. So the chaplain corps dates back to before the official founding of our country. We're older than the United States. George Washington insisted that there would be chaplains in his army to keep the moral fiber of the troops, to make sure that they worshipped on Sunday, to make sure they didn't cuss and gamble and all these things. So he insisted on it. And wrote letters to Congress to make sure that we had chaplains. Well, let's figure out how to use this. There we go. And chaplains have served in every armed conflict since its foundation. Chaplains go where soldiers go. So every armed conflict, chaplains were there. And by the way, I'm going to zip through this pretty quick because of time. I want to be sensitive to that. But I will have opportunity for questions later. Several chaplains who have been received the Medal of Honor for the things that they have done. Their bravery, gallantry in combat, under fire. Several chaplains. The most recent was Chaplain Kapan, who was a Catholic chaplain in Korea, who was captured, taken to a prisoner of war camp, but just the sacrifice, the things that he did to save people's lives. He was just recently posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. But several chaplains have received that. Since World War II, no, actually in World War II, over 8,000 chaplains served. Of course, that was a major conflict. Since our inception, over 25,000 chaplains have served. So chaplains have been everywhere and have, wherever, soldiers, sailors. And I speak, of course, from my Army experience. And I'll try to point out differences with the other branches. And it's pretty similar anyway. To be a chaplain, have to have, of course, education, have to have a bachelor's degree, have to have a master's of at least 72 hours. And we come in with three years of credit, time, and rank because of we have to come in with at least a master's degree. So most chaplains come in as a captain. If they don't, come in as a lieutenant, usually put on captain bars within 6 months. They also have to be ordained by some religious body, and it used to be during the Revolution it was some Christian body. It took into the Civil War before there were Jewish chaplains. Catholic chaplains weren't really accepted until the Civil War. But some religious body they have to be ordained by. They also have to be endorsed for military service. They meet with their denominational hierarchy, and they grill you depending on how strict they are. But they have to be endorsed to serve in whatever role that they're in as a chaplain in whatever branch they're in. And if the denomination ever pulls that endorsement, we have to start getting out of the Army. If my endorser, was endorsed by the Church of the Nazarene, if they ever said we don't feel like Daryl is eligible anymore or qualified to serve, and they pull my endorsement, the next day I have to start getting out of the Army, because without that endorsement I cannot be a chaplain. You have to have that endorsement as well as being accepted into the military, which you have to have 2 years of civilian ministry experience before they'll accept you. And there's some military requirements as well. You don't see, I mean, the chaplains have to meet the same standards as any other soldier, sailor, airman, Marine going into the military. The height and weight standards, everything else, they go through all the same testing and all that, so they meet the same military standards. So that's the qualifications. Of course, the branch insignias, I mean, there's every other branch, they have one branch insignia. So armor has what they have, and infantry has the cross rifles, and MPs have the cross pistols. For chaplains, the branch insignia is whatever faith group they happen to be. So as a Christian, I wear a cross as my branch insignia, but a Jewish chaplain will wear the tablets, and on down the line, Muslim would wear the crescent. And there's also a Hindu. We have had Hindu chaplains as well, but they're few and far between. So in the military, the chaplain doesn't go out by himself, but with a unit ministry team. In the Navy, I think it's called a religious support team. But because the chaplain is a non-combatant, so there's always a chaplain and a chaplain assistant. The current term is religious affairs specialist. In the Navy, I think it's a religious activity specialist or religious support. Anyway, but they all have an enlisted soldier, sailor, airman, that is responsible for protecting the chaplain. Because the chaplain is a non-combatant, the chaplain assistant is a combatant. So chaplains don't carry weapons. So we want a good chaplain assistant that does well on the range, because they take care of us in combat. They are our protection. Up until Vietnam, chaplains could wear a sidearm, could carry a sidearm, could have defensive weapons, but then some chaplains, they would get medals for offensive action, and it got to where we can't even carry defensive weapons anymore after Vietnam, because chaplains are non-combatants. Now, if they're coming over the hill and it's fire or die, well, I'm going to pick up a weapon too, and then, I'd lose my endorsement, I'd lose my everything else when I got home, but I'd get home anyway. So we don't even carry weapons, because that would jeopardize our Geneva Convention status as a non-combatant, because we are able, if we're in a POW status or we're protected, we're able to continue to do our job. We have a lot more freedom because we're able to care for the other soldiers. If we're no longer in the fight, but then it captures it. Now, of course, that, we think World War II and we think conventional warfare with Muslims, not with Muslims, with, the global war on terror and the other things that we've done. Well, they don't care what you are. They don't care about the Geneva Convention. But it's all about that we're non-combatants, and that's important for us to remember. And chaplain assistants, they don't represent a faith group. They're because they have to support the chaplain, whatever faith they are, and support the soldiers, whatever faith they are. So the chaplain assistant doesn't have a faith group. Now the commanders, because we have a chaplaincy, because commanders have responsibilities. The commanders have to, establish and maintain a climate of high moral and ethical standards. That's in regulations. That it's the commander's responsibility. They have to provide religious, spiritual, moral, and ethical support to their troops. That's a requirement for commanders. They have to support the free exercise of religion for all their personnel, and of course they got to make sure their ministry teams have what they need to do that. So because the commanders have to do these things, that's why there are chaplains to work for the commander, to provide what the commander has to provide for their soldiers. So that's why we have chaplains, and they are legally permitted to do their job. The chaplain corps had been challenged back in the 80s. There were some students in Harvard, hey, this will be fun, let's challenge the constitutionality of a chaplain corps, because that's state sponsorship of religion. There's no separation of church and state when you have the government paying the chaplains. And that was struck down because chaplains defend or preserve the free exercise of religion. So we go to the First Amendment. Every soldier has that right, free exercise of religion. So chaplains ensure that right. So that's why we are constitutionally permitted in the military. So the chaplain can be used in many ways in the unit. I'm going to go through that quicker. They do all kinds of training within the unit: suicide prevention, stress management, moral leadership, consideration of others, NCO and officer development. The chaplains are called on to do all kinds of training and to help soldiers become better soldiers. Because a better soldier, you have a war fighter that continues to be able to maintain that strength of the unit. But it goes on, of course, the counseling and things that get more religious, giving advice, but they're a part of everything that goes on. So a chaplain is on the commander's staff, as they are on a commander's personal staff as well as special staff. We're not one of the, like you have your S1, S2, S3, you've got your supply, you've got your intelligence, you've got all those who do that are on the regular staff, but chaplains are on the special staff and personal staff, because we've always got the commander's year, and we have to have the commander's year. So they rely on us for a lot of things, like advising the command on issues of religion, morality, morale in the unit, because chaplains are out there. They hear what the soldiers are saying, without breaking confidentiality, of course. And their chaplain assistants are out there with the unit. So they're able to let the commander know how the morale is, and how different things that are going on in the unit affects being ready. And then chaplains, of course, as part of the staff of the commander, gives support to the leaders and soldiers, family members, all those which help. The commander thinking about readiness. Are we ready to deploy? Are we ready to fight? So that's where the chaplain's value is, keeping the soldiers ready to go, and that includes spiritually. And then coordinating religious services, all the things that promote that readiness. So that's the chaplain's staff duty. But then there's a religious duty, of course. Chaplains are ministers. They have that religious responsibility. So chaplains perform or provide religious support. So I'm a Protestant chaplain. I can perform Protestant stuff. I can lead Protestant worship services. I can do a wedding. I can provide the Lord's Supper. I can do things that are Protestant, Christian. But if I can't do it, because we're a chaplain in a unit to all the soldiers, regardless of their faith group. So if it's something that I am not able to do as a Protestant chaplain, that's where I provide. So I call up my, the Catholic chaplain in the unit down the road and say, I've got a Catholic chaplain that needs to go through, catechism or whatever. So we either perform it if we can, or we provide it if we can't perform it. So that means scheduling and other things. So in some situations that means having to fly in a Catholic chaplain to provide Mass, or arranging for a Jewish chaplain during those holy days. So we perform what we can, we provide the rest. And then again, providing for the free exercise of religion. That's why we are constitutionally mandated, permitted to receive a government paycheck as a religious official, because we provide for the free exercise of religion for those who serve with us. Of course, there's the core values, or the essential things that we do as a chaplain. The first is nurture the living. So we do that through worship services, through religious education, counseling and retreat, things to nurture their spiritual life during normal circumstances. So nurturing the living is the first thing we do. The second essential thing is comfort or care for the wounded and the dying. So we nurture them when there's times when they're wounded or dying. We care for them in the ways that we are able to do that. So comforting them, and then we honor the dead by doing memorial ceremonies, services, graveside services, casualty notifications during wartime. Those who are back in the States, one of the responsibilities chaplains have is going with the notification officers because every service member that dies, their next of kin is notified, and that's with a team, a notification officer and a chaplain. So that's how we nurture the living, comfort the wounded, and honor the dead. That's our essential role as religious professionals. But in combat, a lot of things are different in combat. The religious and spiritual needs have priority. We make sure that they receive what they need, and some religious traditions there are required elements that they must have. So we have to bring in a Catholic chaplain, for example, to provide Mass regularly. Different things that are required religiously, we make sure they receive it. So our time is spent in combat making sure soldiers get what they need. And of course, those three aspects I talked about, they're even more important in combat situations. Nurturing the living, so prior to combat, prior to engagement, we make sure everybody's prayed up. We make sure, when I was deployed, I would provide the Eucharist every week, when traditionally for me it'd be once a month, because soldiers are going outside the wire all the time. They don't know if it's the last service they're going to attend, the last time they get to participate in the Lord's Supper. So we nurture the living prior to engagement. During engagement, of course, we care for the wounded. Well, we're going to be near the aid station so that we can take care of those who come in wounded. We're going to make sure that we are there to pray for them, to be with them, to be present with them. And then after engagement, honoring the dead. And even in combat situations, we have those memorial ceremonies. We make sure that those who fall are honored appropriately from the very beginning in the combat theater all the way back. And you've probably seen like at Dover and the different honors that they're rendered. That continues throughout the process. So combat support again, so nurturing the living. I don't need to go through that again. The stuff that we do, caring for the wounded, performing those things. And then honoring the dead. And you see in movies, I was just watching Band of Brothers, the Catholic chaplain out there, bullets flying all over the place, but the Catholic chaplain is out there giving last rites or providing ministry because those are essential elements of religion. So chaplains go where the soldiers are and do what the soldiers need religiously. Okay, and then finally, and I went through that really quickly, but I thought, finally, we need to remember, it's chaplain, not chaplain.
I just set you up for that with that.
That's right, I appreciate that lead-in, yeah. Are there any questions? I went through that, yeah, yes.
Well, I had a question. If you're a, I guess if you're a Protestant chaplain and a Catholic soldier is dying, can you give him last rites, or?
Well, not official last rites. We can offer prayers. I mean, we can go through that motion, but we can't because that's a sacramental function that a priest needs to do. A Catholic priest needs to do. So that's why it's important that we have good connections with But I think that in combat situations there is some allowance given. If there is no Catholic priest available. And I won't pull into it now, but we're given, in our kits, we're given little cards for the prayers, for last rites, for Jewish, for Muslim, and we've got those things that we can pray. So as far as the chaplain is, he can do it with a clear conscience, then he's able to do what needs to be done, yeah.
And how many, what is the, I guess I'm looking at a ratio. What is the ratio of chaplain to number of troops?
Well, generally there's one, and this goes way back through history, generally there's one chaplain for 1,200 troops. So you would have a chaplain at battalion level. In the Army battalion level, you'd have a chaplain generally around 1,000, 1,200 troops. And so they care for all of them regardless of the faith group. They perform or provide. And then a chaplain's career, well, as you increase in rank, you increase in responsibility, so you go to a brigade, where then you care for several chaplains as well as the brigade, and you can just keep working your way up. But generally, one chaplain to about 1,200 troops. And I should mention, I saw that, the chaplain kits were given so that we go out, because in the field we need to be able to take what we need to provide worship services. So this is a Vietnam-era kit, which has everything that's needed to provide a worship service with communion, with the chalice, and can do communion with intinction, the paten, candles, because you have to have light discipline, so they're inside, but you still have the candles, and then Bible stand, and those are essential parts of providing a worship service. And this, by the way, if you've seen The Longest Day, and the chaplain, it was a British chaplain, fell in the river, keeps going under looking for his kit. That's actually a chaplain Samson. It was an American chaplain. He did several jumps. Both prior to D-Day, and he was a market garden, and he would always be losing his kits because they were suitcases, about this big, heavy, and having to jump with those things. And when he became 1-star, deputy chief of chaplains, he ordered this kit to be developed. And now this kit, the chaplain assistants always want to carry it because it will float, so you can hang on to it. It won't get lost, it won't sink to the bottom, but because of his experience jumping and losing it multiple times, he had this one developed. So this is a Vietnam-era kit. This is a modern kit that's issued now, and it's a lot less to it. It's smaller. When they were jumping into Grenada, this even was too much because they said it's beans and bullets. We can't take your kit, chaplain. So they developed smaller kits that would just go on the chaplain's pistol belt, and he could jump with it. I combined mine, two things into one saw bag. But essentially you have your chalice, you have a paten, and a cross so that you can provide communion on the go wherever you find yourself or you find your soldiers. And there's different varieties based on your faith group. JK,
that was it. I was
anxious
to hear about that.
Good. Yes.
I knew this guy, not well, but I first saw him. I saw him 3 times after he got back from duty over in the Middle East. He looked all right. He's a healthy looking guy. Second time, he looked different and acted slightly. The third time he come back, he looked terrible. Now, if you're a chaplain and that guy's in your group, would you recommend to an officer that something be done to help him out mentally and physically? Because he was obviously having mental and physical.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, because we go around and visit soldiers. The ministry of presence is a big thing that we do. So we go where they're working. In garrison, we'll go to the motor pool. In deployment, we go, you know, out wherever they might be and visit them, and we need to sense things like that. So when we see things where soldiers or sailors, when we see things where they need help, yes, that's when we go to the commander and say, you know, we need to get so-and-so to the, you know, wherever we need to. And when we help as far as we can, but chaplains, most chaplains aren't trained, you know, professional counselors, but are pastoral counselors. So we refer. I mean, we do what we can. But yes, you're right. We keep our eyes open for that. And if they need to get help, we make sure we tell the commander they need to go get help.
Yeah. I wasn't in the military with this guy, but I happened to meet this guy in my job 3 different times.
Yeah, because there's so many things. The post-traumatic stress that they experience when you're in a situation where it's life-threatening and you have no control, that can create that post-traumatic stress. But then there's moral injury too, which is a relatively recently named condition, where because we're not morally, we don't kill. That's not natural. But then you're put in a situation where the government says it's okay to kill, so you kill, but there's that moral tension there because, now wait, I'm not supposed to kill, but then I'm told it's all right to kill. So moral injury is a significant issue, especially with these last wars. And really what they need is forgiveness. I mean, they need a religious body that takes them in and says, we forgive. Not to say it was all right, you were allowed to do it, it was legal, but to say, you're forgiven. But watching those things are important. Any other questions?
One last thing.
Yeah.
Isn't there a federally approved Chaplain's Day, the Four Chaplains or something?
Well, the Four Chaplains Day, February 9th, sometime in February.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a federal holiday. It's not a federal holiday, but it's recognized. The Four Chaplains were on the Dorchester, the United States transport ship Dorchester, and on their way to Iceland. There was Washington, Poling, I can't remember the other four, but there was a Catholic, a Jewish, and 2 Protestants that were on this ship, and they, of course, the German submarines got it, and it went down quickly. And the chaplains, they cared for the soldiers. They gave them their gloves. They gave them their life jackets once they were out of the others as they were handing them out. You know, they ministered to soldiers regardless of their faith group. You know, they didn't ask. The Jewish chaplain didn't say, hey, are you Jewish? Before but they ministered to everybody in those last days. And then they went down with the ship. They were seen, witnesses testified to the fact that they were seen arm in arm as the ship went down, just praying and singing hymns. But so the Four Chaplains, since it wasn't in combat, the things that they did wasn't under fire, they couldn't be awarded the Medal of Honor, but Congress wanted to do something. So they created an award equivalent to the Medal of Honor called the Four Chaplains Medal, which that was the first time it was issued or awarded to those four, and the last time it ever will be, because it wasn't in combat, but it was at the level of the Medal of Honor. So in February, the Four Chaplains Day, it's a significant day, of course, in the chaplain corps. And there is a chaplain, Four Chaplains Chapel at the Navy Yard in Philadelphia that honors them, and they have all kinds of artifacts about that, and they seek to keep that story alive.